Hi class! Welcome to the first lecture in Developmental Psychopathology. Today we're going to be covering the big question, what is developmental psychopathology? So to kind of orient us and help us understand what the goals of today are, by the end of today I want you to be able to describe and define what developmental psychopathology actually is. But I also want us to cover a lot of key terminology. So some terminology that we're going to encounter today are prevalence versus incidence. And then we're also going to discuss a little bit more about what is abnormal behavior in the first place. And find some common terms that we do use in developmental psychopathology. So let's get started. What is this word? So, developmental psychopathology basically is an approach to studying adaptive and maladaptive development. So we really do need to understand more about adaptive development. So what are the actual stages that children and adolescents might go through in order to, be healthy human beings? And we need that to help us understand a little bit more about what happens on the other end of the spectrum, maladaptive development. So things that we call, childhood disorders. So if we think about this, developmental psychopathologists really study childhood disorders and disorders across the lifespan. So it's not just that we are studying this only at childhood, but we might look at the long-term consequences of these disorders or how they might change over the lifespan. Another key fact about developmental psychopathologists is that we really do believe that there's a whole lot going on to define our disorders. So it's not just that there's a chemical imbalance. Instead, there's a whole host of things going on. So we have this interaction between our biology, our psychology, things like our thoughts and our behaviors, and different types of sociocultural factors. So when I ask you to think about what childhood disorders are, what actually comes to mind? Some of you might think of autism, maybe something like ADHD, or even things like depression or anxiety. And all of these are actually part of what we are defining as childhood disorders, and we're going to talk about a lot of them in depth throughout this course. So since we're just doing an introduction, I thought it would be great for us to pause here. I'm going to have a quiz for you to take through this video, and we'll see how that goes. But I wanted you to test yourself and think about what do you know about childhood disorders right now. So I hope you enjoyed taking that little true-false quiz, but maybe you might be concerned about some of the answers, and I thought I would share some of the answers with you. So the very first question you were asked is a child with a psychiatric disorder, are they damaged for life? This is actually false. There is a lot of potential for children who have a psychological disorder to be able to overcome their struggles and to get the help that they need, or to overcome their disorder to be able to live a fulfilling and happy life. The next question, psychological disorders are the same across cultures. I put this as false. So not all psychological disorders are the same across cultures. Have you ever heard of these two words that I'm going to put on the screen? And we also know that rates of diagnoses are actually different across cultures. So sometimes we might see some differences in how we define these different types of disorders across different cultures. Psychiatric disorders do not result from bad parenting. While the child's home environment might actually exacerbate a psychiatric disorder, it's not the only cause. So one of the things I really want you to get away from is by thinking that all childhood disorders are caused by bad parenting. That is not true. And parents are doing the best that they can. So we'll be talking about this as we go forward. So most people think that children are over-medicated whenever I do this quiz in class. But the thing is that that's not actually true. We actually don't see this when we're talking about like how common ADHD is. So when we think about rates of ADHD, not all children who are given that diagnosis are medicated. And children overall aren't over-medicated. There's a lot of really great child psychiatrists out there who deliver medication only as needed. At this point in time, for number 5, we actually can't tell whether or not children have a psychiatric disorder based on blood or brain scans. We're not there yet. And in the case of blood, we haven't found anything for any psychological disorder in adulthood. And with brain scans, we really can't tell the difference. So something that is actually quite true is that about half of all mental disorders begin before the age of 14. And that is actually true. So if you have a psychological disorder as an adult, you have a 50-50 chance of also having that before you were 14 years of age. And we know that about 20% of the world's children and adolescents actually have mental disorders or problems. So this is a very common thing. And I thought this would be a nice segue into our next section about incidence and prevalence to talk about whether or not the rates of autism are actually the most prevalent disorder in the United States. So now's a good time to take a quick break, and I'll see you in the next video.